Hello, and welcome back to Tips and Tricks. Today we're going to take a look at some interesting compositional techniques that can arise from using two different MIDI sequencers together. Today we're going to do that with my plugin Waymaker. You can see I've got two of them loaded up here, and I've got them both sequencing different sounds on outgrowth. Just for context, let's hear what each one is going to sound like. The one on the left is going to sound like this piano. And the one on the right is going to give us this pad sound. So I'm going to focus on our left sequence to start, and I'm going to mute the sequence that's going to the right instance of outgrowth. So this Waymaker, I just want to use to create a nice little meandering kind of melody or bass sequence in the key of D major. So to do that, I'm going to flip over to a Brownian sequencer. I should also note that I am running the beta for the next update of Waymaker, so you might see a couple of new features that you don't recognize. That will all be covered in due time, but in the meantime, just enjoy the sneak peek. But anyway, so we're going to load up a Brownian sequencer. I want this to move relatively slowly, so let's say maybe half notes. Let's set it to go up a fourth, down a second. That sounds pretty good. And let's just hear how that sounds. Kind of sounds like Black Parade. Anyway, let's put this down an octave, I think. Just to be in a lower range. Yep, sounds like Black Parade. So we've got this kind of meandering melody now, but the way I'm thinking about this is I actually want to use this as kind of the root notes of a chord progression. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to the sequencer on our right now. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set our Waymaker on the right to receive the MIDI from the Waymaker on the left. So this simple little meandering melody is now feeding into our second instance of Waymaker. And just as a proof of concept, I will mute the piano sound and I'm going to play the sequence again. So now what we're hearing is that meandering melody as well as this sequence that the Waymaker on the right is generating on its own. So the first thing to note here is that these two instances of Waymaker are actually loaded, or they're set to different scales. This one is major, this one is major pentatonic, and that's on purpose. Because the first thing I want to explore is how we can have a little bit of interplay between these scales that are similar but not equal. And I'm going to change this sequencer to a chord sequencer. So we are going to be adding a third and a fifth to every note that's coming in from the other Waymaker. But we have fewer notes available to us when we construct that chord. The one on the left is generating in D major, but the one on the right is generating in D major pentatonic. So not every note from D major is going to be available. So what's going to happen is basically the chord module kind of lets any notes pass through it. So even if you have the scale set to D major pentatonic, you can pass all the notes from D major through it. But when we generate a chord that those extra notes in the chord are going to be limited to D major pentatonic. So that means we're going to kind of like collapse the options down, and we're only going to have a limited number of the notes available to us. I guess let's just hear how that sounds, because I don't actually know. So that's already an interesting effect. I can hear that we've kind of collapsed the harmonic options and the harmonic space down to a more limited set of chords, and it's this very like plagal kind of like church sound. So just to demonstrate the difference, I'm gonna flip back to D major for a second Waymaker, and we can hear the difference here. So right there, that's a diminished chord, which is possible in D major, but in D major pentatonic, that diminished chord is impossible. We kind of fudge it to something else. So I think that's pretty cool. I think this is an interesting way to think about kind of the harmonic options that you want available to you, kind of the possible harmonic space. We could even do this to, we could do this in a more custom way. So let's say I have this D major scale. Rather than using D major pentatonic, I just want to kind of decide which notes are in there. Let's see, I just took out E and B from D major. I don't know how that's going to sound, but let's find out. So it's pretty cool. I think this is an interesting thing to kind of toy around with and experiment with. Now, another thing we can do here is we can use a similar principle with melodies as opposed to chords. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to turn the original piano sound back on. So our Waymaker on the left is going to be sequencing that piano sound just for a bit of counterpoint. And I'm going to change the Waymaker on the right to generate a melody now. So I'm going to use the sum sequencer because that's always fun to kind of create things that you're not really quite expecting to create. I'm going to set up a relatively simple sequence, maybe something like this. Okay, so there we have it, just generating MIDI. We're just generating that melody on top of whatever this one's doing. I'm going to change this into transpose mode. So now we are going to take the melody from the left Waymaker, and we are going to start transposing it around. So essentially what that means is we are going to kind of move the melody that this sum sequencer is generating up, down, and around based on the melody on the left. But critically, remember, this sequencer is generating in D major. This one is set to D major pentatonic. So it's going to follow along, but it is going to limit itself to the pentatonic version of the scale on the left. So we're going to get a little bit of harmonic interplay. So this is really fun because this is kind of a common concept in a lot of styles of music, a lot of different music theory applications here, which is that we're in some kind of diatonic or complex underlying key, but a lot of times in a lot of styles, melodies will be limited to pentatonic or some form of a simpler related scale. You can think about this a lot with like guitar solos. The first thing you learn is to play pentatonic over top of whatever key is going on. So this is kind of a similar concept. We have a relatively lush chord progression going on, but we are complementing it with a pentatonic melody, which is kind of following it around and kind of following the chord and kind of coloring it and giving it, interesting context. But we do get this nice little interplay. Just as a proof of concept, I'm going to throw a chord after our sequence over here so that we get a full triad within the key of D major and a melody in D major pentatonic. And again, we can play around with this scale over here as well. Like maybe we want a different kind of pentatonic scale. Something like that. So I think this is a really interesting way just to think about generating melodies, generative music, kind of what do we want to highlight? What do we want to encourage our melody to contain? What do we want to omit from it, from its possibilities? And, how can we have this interplay between something very recognizable like D major, a diatonic scale, being complemented by something that's a little bit more characterful and a little bit more unique? So hopefully this made sense. I think this is really interesting to play around with, and especially once we get into this realm of kind of feeding MIDI sequences into each other and having all of this really rich interaction going. So this is something that's it's kind of a core principle of my plugin Waymaker. If you haven't tried Waymaker before and this was interesting to you, I'd recommend that you check it out. There's a free trial for the desktop version. So I would encourage you to think about it and kind of think about these different ways that we can kind of generate music and create these really fun rules that can have really interesting and just really musical applications. So take care.